In my view, the Paris Agreement is like a framework agreement of some sort, because it deals specifically with the framework for mitigation. It has a framework for adaptation. It has a framework for loss and damage. It has a framework for gender, a framework for agriculture, transparency. It also has a technology framework. And various frameworks were established in the Paris Agreement. And in my view now, what needs to be done now is to elaborate and to implement those frameworks and to create the rules and guidelines for those frameworks. So in a sense, it is the platform. It's the platform for going forward. It changed the dynamics of the previous negotiation, and it has centralized the issues relating to common but differentiated responsibilities to the extent that all parties now, all countries have taken a commitment based on their own domestic situation to deal with the issue of climate change. So in a view, I will say it is a framework agreement setting out the platform for action, global action on climate change.
There are two outcomes that will result from the 2018 negotiations. The first one is the elaboration of the framework for implementation of the Paris Agreement. Dr. Thomas said the framework. The last 2 years we've spent elaborating on what are these day-to-day rules to implement the agreement. So for example, in terms of the national contributions of countries, we're negotiating how should these contributions be defined, what information should be presented so that we can actually measure that people have done what they said they're going to do. Then how do you report on what you said you're going to do? What kind of information you submit, how regular you submit it, how is it validated, and so on. There's a system called the compliance system, for example. How do we measure that whether or not countries have delivered what they said they were going to deliver? And more importantly, what's going to happen to those who have not met their targets? We're supposed to come up with something that's facilitative and should help them to improve in future years to improve their targets. And surrounding all of that is the 5-year, what we call in the global stocktake, an assessment every 5 years of how much progress we've made. And that assessment should then inform your next round of targets, or NDCs as we call them, nationally determined contributions. That whole process of elaborating the rules is supposed to be finished by the end of 2018. And therefore, during the year, there's quite a lot of work to be done to elaborate and detail those rules. So that's the first output for 2018. The second output is something called the Talanoa Dialogue, which is a process that will review where we are to date and will come up with recommendations to governments on what kind of effort is required in the new NDCs, which are due from 2020, to be able to reduce emissions further. Under the current targets in the Paris Agreement, the long-term increase in temperature is still going to be more than 3 degrees Celsius. The Paris Agreement has agreed that we should be striving to 1.5, so we have to literally cut it in half or more. And therefore, the assessment in the Talanoa Dialogue is going to look at what can countries do to increase the emissions reductions so that we're right now at 1.1, so that we don't get beyond 1.5. And that dialogue is taking place this year, and we'll make recommendations to governments. So when governments come up with new targets next year, those new targets will be informed by that dialogue process. So 2 very important outputs for this year: the targets for the new NDCs and the rules and regulations for the implementation of the Paris Agreement. 1.5 special report. The processes in 2018, the Talanoa Dialogue, the assessment of the level of ambition for the new targets, is a process that's going to start, that has started in fact. It was launched in January, or in COP in December. They've started activities in January. There, in fact, is a web portal already open where individuals, countries, private sector entities, anybody can submit inputs on 3 questions. Where are we now? Where do we want to be, and how do we get there? So that process is going on throughout the year, and it is important that as vulnerable countries, our countries also contribute to that process. In addition to that, there is a special report which has been commissioned by the COP. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has been asked to do a report on the implications of 1.5. How do we get to 1.5? What's the difference between 1.5 and 2? What impacts you have at 1.5 and what pathways, etc. And that report is due out in first week of October. That's an important report because it's going to provide this scientific basis for assessing how much effort is required and how urgently the effort is required by the global community, and therefore will inform how radical, if I may use that term, the new NDCs, the new targets should be. So that special report is probably the most important document that's going to be available this year, because based on what it says, governments can then see how much effort they will have to do to remain within 1.5. On the Telenor dialogue, we need to be making inputs. If we do not make inputs in terms of how we see the process, in terms of where we are, for example, we need to be making inputs showing the kind of damages we suffer, the kind of impacts, like the hurricanes from last year and so on. We need to bring that into the system. And then where do we want to go? We need to be able to show what kind of levels of ambition and levels of reduction in emissions and levels of financial and technical support and capacity building support we require. So we need to be part of that agenda from now. Then at the COP, there will be discussions of this information that has been submitted. So we need to ensure that our delegates at the COP are empowered to participate in those negotiations. And then further to that, there's going to be a next round of submissions in October, and then the dialogue in December. So first of all, we need technical participation at all these levels. Then there's also technical participation needed at the level of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. They're working on the 1.5 special report. And the 1.5 special report has a number of stages. It is right now going through what they call a first order review, in that they've done an initial draft and they sent it to governments to review it. We need to review it to ensure that it adequately addresses the issues of concern to us. After that draft, those responses are made, it will be revised, and a second draft issued around May, June. Again, we need to check to make sure that draft is issued is accurate in terms of reflecting our issues, and then the final report will be reviewed and edited at an IPCC meeting in October. So we need to make sure that we have our scientists and our technical people at that meeting in October. So there is the Telenor process, there is the IPCC process. And then overlaying both of these, there is an informal political process that takes place throughout the year. There should be some form of consistent political representation from the region. Should be participating in all of these so that they can build up a rapport with their other colleagues and some level of trust and sensitivity to what is important to the Caribbean as we go through the year. So the technical work in the IPCC, the negotiator work in the Telenor dialogue, and the development of the work program, and the political involvement which oversees all of this. If we want to be successful and get the 2018 outputs to reflect what's important for us, we have to participate in those 3 streams of work very actively.
Well, I will agree with this 100%. We must be on the table as CARICOM. And I agree with the saying that if you're not on the table, well, you're on the menu. And I mean, our priorities will suffer. I mean, we got to be there to ensure that the special circumstances and unique vulnerabilities of small island states are protected. We need to be there for that. I think we need to be there to ensure that the resources are available to address the scourge of climate change, to build resilience in the Caribbean region. We need to be there to ensure that the resources, we need to be there to ensure that significant mitigation action are taken in line with the 1.5 report. We need to be there to ensure that adaptation efforts are of the level to ensure that we have real activities on that line. You just have to record what happened in this year in the Atlantic hurricane season, where we have these devastating hurricanes taking place in the Caribbean region and the impact on the region as a whole. So we need to be there to be able to work towards this resilience building, to make progress on the issue of loss and damage, to make progress on the issues of technology development and transfer, especially for issues relating to your changing of your energy sector, the reform in the energy sector. So we need to be there to protect all of those gains that we have made so far and to consolidate our actions going forward in terms of climate action for the Caribbean. Resilience is key. Building resilience across the Caribbean and across all small island developing states is a key issue that we need to be working on at the COP. So we got to be on the table or we are on the menu. All of our activities, all of our priorities will be off the table in our whip if we are not there to make noise and to fight to ensure that we keep these things center in the negotiation.
At a technical level, we have a challenge with the consistency of representation. Because when you get to the negotiations, one person cannot attend all the negotiating sessions or cover all the topics. In the Paris Agreement Work Program, for example, we have 8 different streams of work. So what tends to happen is that individuals will be assigned 1 or 2. But if an individual comes to the first meeting and then doesn't come to our second meeting, it means that either you have nobody participating in that meeting or you have somebody brand new who doesn't know the issue and has to start from scratch. Because this is a decision here, it is important that we have consistency of representation and participation at all the key meetings for all the key issues. Otherwise, our voices will be lost. So I think the first important thing in terms of how you address it is that countries need to commit the negotiators and support the negotiators in participating in those meetings for which they have been assigned responsibility. That's one. And that responsibility will not only be a national responsibility, it's also a regional responsibility. In fact, it's a small island state responsibility because we negotiate with AOSIS. And the same thing, each country probably has 1 or 2 persons attending. But we have a myriad of issues. Sometimes you have 36 items on the agenda at the COP. So we need people who understand the issues to work on it. The second challenge is our political representation. Our political ministers need to do 2 things. They need to become familiar with the issues that's going to be debated on at the COP. So for example, the Talanoa dialogue issues and outcomes. The decisions are going to be political decisions. What do we do based on all the scientific information that's going to come from the IPCC special report and so on? And therefore, whichever ministers will be going to the COP should begin to prepare themselves in advance, because you cannot just come to the COP, pick up a briefing paper and read some talking points. It doesn't work like that. Because what you have is a dialogue between ministers. And you'll read the talking points and somebody will ask you, but can we consider this? And if you don't understand the issue, you're lost. So the ministers need to do that, that's one. And secondly, they need to begin to participate in the meetings for ministers that they're invited to. Because sometimes we get invitations and we don't turn up. Because that's where you build the rapport, that's where you build the connections, that's where people begin to understand what's important to you. And the only reason why we were able to get the successes we got in Paris is because the St. Lucian minister at the time, who was responsible for sustainable development, made it his duty to participate in those meetings to learn the issues and so on. To the point that when we got to Paris, he was actually invited to chair one of the working sessions dealing with reduction in emissions, which is one of the reasons why we got the 1.5, because we actually, I'm not saying he was biased, but we had somebody there who understood the issues and was trusted enough to chair, and therefore could, in a sense, direct the discussion. So challenges, participation, consistency, and political representation. These are the key challenges. The technical work, we have people in the region who are good at the technical levels. They could handle it, they could handle the issues, and so on. But the final decisions are not made by the technical people. They're made at the political level. And therefore, that's where we have to put the effort. at this stage.